In trying to prevent Ayaram Gayaram politics, India's anti defection law may have unintentionally created a deeper constitutional dilemma. Should elected representatives remain accountable primarily to party leadership or to the people they represent? Hello everyone, my name is Rajni Jha. Welcome to Drishti IAS. In today's session, we are going to discuss one of the most important topics in Indian polity, that is anti defection law. At first glance, it looks very simple. It is just trying to prevent politicians from changing parties. But to understand the nuances, you need to go deeper. Let's get started. The first, we'll see why is this in news. Second, what exactly is anti-defection law, the grounds for disqualification, exceptions, and the criticisms. So why is this in news? I'm sure you have read this news somewhere. The Supreme Court of India gave Telangana Legislative Assembly Speaker a 3-week deadline to decide pending disqualification petitions warning of contempt proceedings for delay. Now, see, the issue raised here is if the speaker who has to decide whether a politician has defected, whether they should be disqualified or not, if the decision takes too long, then this anti-defection law is actually waste. It is of no use, right? So this delay by speaker defeats the purpose itself of anti-defection law, which is why the Supreme Court has given 3-week deadline to come to a conclusion. Otherwise, it will be considered contempt. Okay, now let's first understand what exactly is anti-defection law and why was the law needed. In order to understand why was the law needed, we need to go back to Indian politics in 1960s and 1970s. There was a very famous phrase at that time which was Ayaram Gayaram. Why? Because the politicians, once they got elected, would change parties as per their will, at their whims and fancy. And this would bring down the government. This would collapse the government, not because people voted them out, but simply because their party members defected. They changed the party after being elected. That is called defection. So there was a need to stop this, and that was anti-defection law. There were three prime problems with defection. First, it was creating a lot of government instability. So political instability was being created, due to which this was required. Second, horse trading. To prevent horse trading. What is that? Political parties started buying legislators to stop that. Next, stop toppling of governments. Because they kept changing political parties, the government would collapse, of course, eventually. To stop that, this was required. And finally, to avoid betrayal of public mandate. See, when a politician changes the party, he not only is disloyal to his political party, he is also disloyal to the people who have elected him, right? So, to avoid that as well, this was required. Now, what is anti-defection law? It was introduced by 52nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1985, and 10th schedule was added. 10th schedule was added to the constitution. This 10th schedule itself is anti-defection law, and this applies to both parliament and state legislatures. Now this was, of course, as I explained, this was brought about because we wanted to prevent political defections for personal gain, that there is some ministerial position because of which the person has changed the party. Any sort of personal gain, that is Ayaram Gayaram. To stop that, to prevent that, this anti-defection law was brought about. So we know that 52nd Constitutional Amendment Act was made for this and 10th schedule was made for this. Now these are very important, but apart from that, there is one more Constitutional Amendment Act which is very important for anti-defection law, which is the 91st Constitutional Amendment Act. Why? It actually helped anti-defection law get stronger. How? First, before this, there was split provision. What is split provision? If in a political party, 1/3 members of a party broke away, that was called a split. That was not called defection. That was called a split. And the members were not disqualified in split. So everybody started misusing this, obviously, because this is a loophole. So this 91st Constitutional Amendment Act removed this split provision to avoid the loophole. Second, it only kept merger exception. What is merger exception? If 2/3 members of a party agree to merge with another party, then they will not be disqualified. Then it will not be considered defection, because if such a number, great number of politicians are moving, that shows that they truly align with the other party and not this party. Third, it restricted the size of Council of Ministers. This amendment specifically at added at center, and it states that the number of ministers cannot exceed 15% of total strength of the house. Now, how did this help in anti-defection law? Because earlier, as I told you, horse trading was going on. Earlier, a political party could simply tell the politicians of another political party, oh, you come to my party, I'll give you this ministerial position. And everybody could get a ministerial position. But now that the number is limited, they're only 15%, it should not exceed 15%, then this cannot be used as reward for everyone. So this indirectly helped anti-defection law. What are the grounds for disqualification? Any MP or MLA can be disqualified first if he voluntarily gives up party membership. So, and now this has two parts. First, if he gives his resignation, openly gives his resignation after being elected, that I don't want to be a part of this political party. So we know this. But apart from that, in Ravi Naik case, Ravi Naik versus Union of India case, the court mandated that this voluntarily giving up of party membership doesn't have to be official resignation. What does that mean? Now, if I am that person, even if I don't officially resign my position from my political party, I simply act in a way that shows that I'm not aligned with them. For example, they ask me to vote on a particular matter. I do not do that. I openly say that I am a part of this political party, but I keep showing alliance towards something else. So even if in your conduct, even if in your behavior, if it shows that you are more aligned to other party and not to your party, that will also be considered defection. Okay, not just simply giving resignation. Second, votes or abstains against party whip. What is whip? Whip is official instruction which tells a political party members that, oh, this is the matter that you should be voting on and you have to agree or disagree. So they get instruction. This is official instruction so that everybody can have consensus, right? So let's say I'm a part of a political party and I was told that I should be voting on this matter and I should be agreeing to this matter particularly, and I don't do that. I either don't vote or I don't agree with it. In both the cases, it will be considered defection and I will be disqualified. I could be disqualified. Next is independent member joins a party. Now, there in elections, sometimes it happens that there are members who have been elected and they were not a part of any political party earlier. They were independent members and people voted for them because probably they connected with their ideology, they liked their personality or whatever. But after being elected, if they join a political party, now that will be grounds for disqualification under defection. Why? Because when they were elected, they were not a part of any political party, right? They were not a part of the political scenario. But now they have changed that. And because of it, that is considered disqualification. People voted for them because they were not a part of political party. Now they have changed that. So again, the first slide that I explained to you, where you have to keep in mind public mandate also. You cannot be disloyal to them. So this shows disloyalty to the public mandate. Next, nominated member joins a party after 6 months. So there are certain nominated members and they are given a 6-month duration to join a party, right? But if some nominated member joins a party after 6 months, that will also be grounds for disqualification. Next is, what are the exceptions? There are two exceptions to this. First, merger exception, which I have already explained to you earlier, that if two-thirds members agree to merge with another party, then it will not be considered defection and it will not be the grounds for disqualification. Next, presiding officer exception. So if the speaker or chairman resigns from the political party because that person wants to be neutral, in that case, that will not be considered defection. So speaker, the ultimate say whether a political party member should be giving his resignation, should be disqualified or not, the ultimate say stands with the speaker or chairman, right, of the respective houses. So if they say, oh, I'm going to resign from my political party because I want to stay neutral, not for a personal gain or something, just because they want to stay neutral, in that case also it will not be considered disqualification. Okay, what are the major problems or criticisms? First, I'm sure you must have guessed it, is speaker bias. Now, speaker usually belongs to the ruling party. And let's say some defectors are there who are acting in a way that is helping the ruling party. So, in practical sense, the speaker may not be inclined for their disqualification. So, this is creating a political bias. That is a problem. Second, no time limit in the constitution. Now, Constitution does not define any time limit for deadline. There is no deadline in this anti-defection law, right? And this creates a problem. Although there was a case, Kesham Meghchandra case versus Honorable Speaker Manipur Legislative Assembly to 2020, you will read about it. Here, there was only advised that maximum time should be 3 months. Within 3 months, you should get to a decision whether a particular person, a particular politician is disqualified or not. That decision should be taken within 3 months. But this was not made a constitutional change. This was not made any change. They were not made any changes in the constitution. So, because this was purely a form of advice, a piece of advice, we cannot say that this made any changes in the constitution. And even now, there is no limit, time limit as to when this decision should be given, right? Next is, it hurts democracy. How? If the whip system becomes extremely strict, the legislators would simply have to accept whatever is told to them. Okay, you have to vote for this party, you have to vote for this particular issue, and I have to vote for it because the whip says so. So where is the democratic sense in it? Where is my will in it? Where is my opinion in it? So it hurts democracy. Similarly, it also weakens intra-party democracy. What is intra-party democracy? Now, because all the members have to accept whatever whip is saying, and any internal dissent will be suppressed. So let's say 2 or 3 members do not agree or 5 members do not agree. Even in that case, they cannot voice their opinion, right? And their dissent will be suppressed. So this weakens intra-party democracy also. This is called high command culture, that a group of top politicians are deciding everything and everybody is simply agreeing to it. Otherwise, they will be disqualified. Now, there is an important case with this anti-defection law, and I think you should definitely know about this if you're reading anti-defection law, which is Kyoto Holohan versus Zachilu 1992. Now, what is this? In this case, the Supreme Court said that Speaker's decision is subject to judicial review. What does that mean? Before this case, whatever Speaker decided about the disqualification was final, and courts could not intervene. But here, the Supreme Court said that judicial review is a part of basic structure of the Constitution and that cannot be taken away. So even after Speaker has already made his decision, courts can intervene. It comes under judicial review under 3 conditions. First condition is malified intent. If the court believes that the decision was taken in bad faith, we have just studied political bias. If there was political bias, then courts can intervene. Or if there was a violation of any constitutional provision, in that case also courts can intervene. Or the procedure was not followed properly, that case also courts can intervene. Now, I have 2 questions for you. I really hope you have understood the entire concept until now. The 2 questions are, first is, there's a conflict between political stability and legislative freedom. What does that mean? If legislators keep defecting, government will collapse. But if legislators are never allowed to disagree with their party, then where is democracy? Democracy becomes controlled by the party leadership. So what do you think should be followed? Political stability or legislative freedom? And the second question for you is speakers, because we know that speakers generally belong to the ruling party. So should speakers really be trusted to decide the defection cases neutrally? They could simply delay the process itself. That is called pocket veto, right? They could simply delay the process of decision because the defectors are helping the ruling party, right? So there could be a bias here. So these are the 2 questions for you. And now we are towards the end of our lecture. There is one question, prelims practice question. And this question is your homework. Just pause the screen, read the question, get me the answer. I will be waiting for your answers in the comment section below. That's it for today's session. Thank you so much for joining in. I really hope you understood the concept clearly. Until next time, have a great day and take care.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.